House to Home, presented by Remax Diamond Realty.
Building bridges is what we do here on House to Home, everybody. And Liz, Gina, and myself, Jason Salas, we talk about building relationships, building structures, building commercial property, building homes that you will make your house, your family super, super happy. So, Gina, I'm going to pose the first question to you because we're talking about buildings today. I've always wondered, ever since I was a little kid, so many buildings on Guam, either when they're being constructed or I don't know if it's just like they just stop work, but they always have the rebar sticking up like in all sorts of directions, like from the top. What is the purpose of that? Is that just unfinished work?
I think it's called anticipation. That's what you call those rebars.
You know what I'm talking
And,
about, right? You go somewhere and it just like
and
I mean, it doesn't look like they're telecommunications, like antenna or anything like that.
no, I'm not kidding. It really is anticipation bars.
A
People
second
leave.
floor, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's in anticipation of adding on to the structure. That's what they're for. But Jason, I'm glad you brought up the idea of building, right? Building bridges, building homes, building.
Building a
You know,
building.
yeah. Well, we understand it's expensive out there. We get that. And honestly, Liz and myself, we've had owners reach out to us that have their own property. And perhaps this is you out there, right? You have your own land and you're interested in finding out if you could build on it yourself. We promote the idea that you build on your property. If you need information, why don't you reach out to us and we'll figure out, we can at least tell you what you need to do to start in that process. So instead of anticipation bars, let's anticipate you being able to build on your land, right?
So stop anticipating and just go to the bar. I mean, if that's your thing.
Not the bar.
Okay, but trust me, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls watching this right now, there really is no question too out of left field when it comes to real estate for these two. I've been asking these two weird questions like that about the rebar for 9 years and everything like that, and they always come through with the information, even if the answer is like semi-trivial, as we just saw there.
But Liz has experience. Liz has built on her own land too, right, Liz?
Yeah.
We promote that.
I think both of us has had years of experience about building, but going back to the rebars, if you are, as Gina puts it, anticipating building on a second floor or a third floor, wherever the rebars are poking out. I know sometimes it could be considered an eyesore, but the recommendation would be if you're not going to build for another year or two, the best thing to do is maintain those rebars. Because once they start rusting, if you utilize it in the process, eventually there's a term they call spalling, that some of the older homes are experiencing that right now, where if you're looking up on the ceiling, you're going to see the concrete falling away. And then beneath it, if a contractor clears it up, you're going to see rebars. And part of it, when the rebars start to rust, it starts to expand and it rejects the concrete that is adhering to it. So if you're having rebars on your rooftop, you want to maintain them and seal them so that it protects it, so that it doesn't start to rust. Because let's say a year, 2, 5 years later, you start to build, that may affect your structure, later. So the best thing to do is, if you're anticipating, you want to make sure you seal it and you protect it so that when you're finally ready, that rebar has not rusted enough to affect the concrete that it adheres to.
Okay, so we've learned two things here. Yeah, one, they generally are like quite unsightly. I mean, it may look like shoddy construction, but two, that may be an indicator of work yet to come, or at the very least, it's people like taking preventive maintenance, I guess, for a project. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. So going back to building on your property, what you can build is dependent on your zoning. So you may want to know, what zone are you in? And those are critical items to learn. Can you build one building, two building? Can you build an apartment building? So you may want to find out what your zone is if you're looking to build. And the other thing would be, is sewer available? Because if, let's say, you had 1,000 square meter lot, and you had the ability to build 2 structures, you'd have to subdivide that lot, because your minimum size is 461 square meters. If it's R1 zone, I mean, we're going to get technical here and may get deeper into the maze, but if it's R1 zone, for example, and the lot is big enough to subdivide so you can have two houses, it could be done provided there's sewer and the zoning is supports what you're going to build. So zoning is critical in terms of how many structures you can build, what type of structure, etc.
Okay, I do have a question here, and I'm not at all being silly about this, because again, this is wonderful question day right here on the show, right? House to home, giving you the knowledge you need to be. Miss Gina, right? Have you ever in your decades of experience doing real estate on Guam ever run into anybody, and I'm totally serious here, that wanted to build a tree house, but do so like as their permanent place of residence? Because we have these wonderful trees here, like, you know, Swiss Family Robinson. I can see that happening. And what if people wanted to run utilities, or, you know, basically take like one of the big banyan trees, or, you know, one of the big trees, and actually make that a permanent residential structure or commercial
No,
property?
I've never run into anybody who wanted to build a tree house as their permanent structure. You know, Jay's building, but there are people who've built maybe not so-called tree house, but structures on their property just to use. But it is really expensive to build here. So I imagine, you know, if anyone is looking for some type of residential home and they've got the means to build something, it's like I ran into a contractor over the weekend who's building a piece, he's building on someone's lot in Epan, and it's 1,800 square feet. So that sounds pretty big, right? I mean, actually, that is big. That's a big house. But he was using 2 containers. So his specialty is he uses containers and builds around the container to create 1,800 square feet. And that's, I think that was the purpose of us bringing up this topic today. For people want to build on their property, there's all kinds of ways to get creative and to build something affordable. And yeah, you're right. Perhaps somebody is going to build a tree house of some sorts, or, you know, some structure on their land. But what we want to do is maybe put you on the right track, start off the right way. And we have a checklist of what you need to do. But this gentleman was building for somebody, and he mentioned that the price of that 1,800 square foot home is 150,000 finished. Now you look at that and you're like, wow. And honestly, he sent me renderings, and it's going to look really nice when he's complete. But of course, it's not concrete. And so there's a variety of issues that run along with that. And he was also building on someone's land. So you have to already own the land. So if you already own land and you want to get creative about what you could do with your property, you want some ideas, just call me and Liz and pick our brains, and we'll give you some ideas.
Okay,
They're not all gonna work.
I am going to
idea.
invoke that privilege once again, because Liz, let's go back to you, because you have been someone who has built on land that you own. And how much leeway or how much freedom do we have as landowners to build without having to go through, you know, getting permit process and everything? Because if we already have a house, like because so many people on Guam, you know, we build an outside kitchen, or we build like a tool shed or a house for the dog that gets added to and added to and added to, and next thing you know, like it's a guest room. And how much can we do that on our own?
The permitting process is a requirement. You can't just go out. I mean, if you're building a small shed to store stuff, maybe that's not a big deal, but the permitting process is pretty critical. We ran across a situation.
You can't just set up an extension on your own.
No, we ran across a situation where a gentleman was trying to rent out an existing structure on his property, and the property was big enough, and it was a half acre, which you could have 2 structures on it. But in order to get his business license, the officials wanted to see, okay, show us your permitting, show us your plans that you got a permit to build the second structure. And he could not the contractor did not have any plans and no permits. So therefore he could not get his business license. So now what he's trying to do is work it backwards and work with the department to get renderings of the structure, and in order to get the permit. But otherwise he will not be able to get his business license. Going back to the container homes, there are companies here who do container homes. There's two things. An individual, my nephew actually built his own container home, and he's going through the permitting process of the septic tank and all of that. But there are companies who do it, and they charge 60 to 80,000 for just one container. And many of us see that around the island where people actually live in them. They have one bedroom, a kitchen, and a small living area.
Mm-hmm.
So what people have resorted to do is buying a container. Either they outfit it themselves or they buy it already outfitted. The thing is, you still need a permit. You cannot just go out there and start constructing on your own, because you're going to need a septic tank or connect to the sewer. So there are a number, and we don't recommend shortcuts because it'll burn you in the end. You want to make sure everything is in place and do it properly. So we don't condone building without the proper permitting process.
Mm. Gina, what is the most common the most common thing after, like, say, after a house has already been built, and maybe 3 years later, 5 years later, and then people want to augment or add or be additive, or like extend, enhance, like whatever the term you want to use. What is the most common thing that people want to do to a building on the residential side and with the commercial market, like if they want to expand?
Well, the most common thing that I've seen is either enclosing the carport and turning that into living quarters, or adding on to the property so that you have additional, maybe an outside kitchen, a patio. If you don't already have a carport, I see a lot of people. So that would be the second thing.
My goddaughter just did that, actually.
Yeah, you're either enclosing the existing carport or you're adding on a carport. Those are the two most popular things that I've seen. But I do have to, Liz is absolutely correct. You need a permit. Those are structural changes, and the law says you've got to go and get a permit.
What is the highest we can build? Let's talk about altitude now and going like straight up. Because of course, like, we're not the type of island like Manhattan is, right? Where there's a limited amount of horizontal space. So somebody way back in New York said, okay, let's just go build up, and we've got so much more space. What does the building code say, like on Guam, about how high you can make it? Because I remember when I was going to Sanchez, a classmate of mine, his family lived in a house right across the street in Liguan, and they had 3 floors, and we all thought it was the most amazing structure we'd ever seen, because it's like, wow, it's, you never see a 3-story house on Guam. But what is the limit?
I believe you have 3. There's 3 stories. There are levels that you can build. But again, go to Public Works and get your requirements from them. Because these are things that they check off in order to get your different permitting process when you do build. So yes, if you have an existing structure, a 2-story, and you want to build a 3rd-story level, you may want to see an architect, because your 2-story structure may not be able to support, and we see this all the time. We want to build a 2nd floor, or we want to build a 3rd floor, but a structural engineer would give them advice. Will your existing structure be able to accommodate the weight and the level of the 2nd floor? Because if it doesn't, then there are going to be modifications to the design of the building to support the 2nd or 3rd level. Otherwise, it could be a hazard.
Yeah, so, and now we're back to where we started, because now we're talking about the rebar coming out of like the roof again.
Yeah, please consult the expert, the structural engineer, to see whether they're able to support a 2nd floor or a 3rd floor. And if not, there are designs that could be made to support that. Sometimes we get structures that are tin roofing, and we don't know whether that structure could support a concrete roof. In fact, again, a structural engineer is required. The professionals will help guide you through that process.
Okay, and we'll end on this point, because to paraphrase a very popular English philosopher, there are no dumb questions. The only dumb thing to do is to not ask a question at all. And that's why Liz and Gina and their colleagues at Remax Diamond Realty Guam are there to answer basically anything you can ever throw at them. And they like a challenge. I mean, it's, like, test them. Stretch their brains.
Hey, we don't have all the answers, but if we don't have the answer, we'll go find the answer and get it from the expert in that particular area. We can only talk about our lines of expertise and our experience, but other than that, we always go to the experts in that particular arena.
There you go. And if it has to do with rebar, then Gina's like basically all over that, as we've seen in this episode. So ladies, you're the best. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jace.
All right. See you next week.
House to Home, presented by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.